Well, you heard it first on CNBC when President Trump, in that exclusive interview with our global affiliate, spoke of imposing an additional penalty on India in the next 24 hours. 24 hours is now. The White House has issued an order, an executive order signed by President Trump. With that order, an additional 25% tariff has been levied on India, taking the effective tariff on India to 50%. That is the headline there, a 50% tariff rate on India. Brazil, the only other country to have a 50% tariff rate being levied on it. Now, where does this leave India? Remember, as per the previous order, the exemptions on sectors like pharmaceuticals, automobiles, semiconductors, everything under Section 232 continues to exist as is. So the exemptions that were provided for in the order when 25% tariffs were originally imposed, those exemptions continue. So there is some relief and some reprieve there. But it's also important to note that that reprieve is effective till the 17th of August or around that time. So one will have to wait to see what happens to the items under Section 232. Now, the other point that one needs to take note of is that, remember, India and the US were still engaged in negotiations for the bilateral trade agreement. 5 rounds of negotiations had taken place. Now, a coincidence, perhaps, or is it? Because the next round of negotiations, where the US team was supposed to visit India, the 6th round of negotiations was scheduled for the 25th of August. And that kind of coincides with the timeline, the 21-day timeline that President Trump's executive order has set out. Now, we've been speaking with experts, we've been speaking with former diplomats, with former trade negotiators, with the former chairman, vice chairman of the Niti Aayog, etc., to understand what the options are. Let's be clear, today is a shock for Indian exporters. 25% was bad, 50% is terrible. Is it catastrophic? Well, when it comes to doing trade with the US, it most certainly is. Why do I say that? Because our peer group, the countries that the US does engage in trade with, the China +1 countries, including China, which, by the way, continues to have a pause with the US as far as tariff imposition is concerned at this point in time. Countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand, even Bangladesh now at a lower tariff rate than India. They're all between 19 to 20%. India now at 50%. So this clearly puts us and our Indian exporters at a disadvantage. So what can be the options? Can that 21-day window be used to negotiate? And more importantly, what do we negotiate about? What has President Trump said for why he's imposing this 25% additional tariff? He's saying because India is dealing with Russia to buy oil and then sell oil and profit from it. So now it's not about open up your markets. It's not even about tariffs anymore. Remember, he continues to accuse India of being a tariff king. None of that. This order today is very squarely on account of why President Trump says we are dealing with Russia, and so he's imposing this additional penalty on India on account of that. But here's the double speak, because the US continues to engage with Russia for many items, including for items like uranium, etc. The EU continues to trade with Russia. There is a price cap mechanism, but it continues to trade with Russia. So why is India being singled out and being targeted? And if India were to say no to Russian crude, which we haven't so far, will it change things? President Trump has said that the order could be modified if India aligns itself to the US's interests. Now, what are the US's interests? If India were to say, okay, we'll stop buying from Russia, Russian crude, will that ensure that there is a positive modification from the order and that this additional 25% tariff rate goes away? We don't know. What qualifies as aligning with US interests? That is the big question today. Now, going back again to the point about the bilateral trade. Does President Trump want India to put more on the table as far as agriculture and the dairy sectors are concerned? For instance, the former vice chairman of the Niti Aayog, Rajiv Kumar, saying that India must negotiate. He believes that the export opportunity, the export market is much larger than giving some concessions away as far as the dairy sector, etc. is concerned. He believes that those red lines that have been drawn by India may or could perhaps convert to pink lines to open up some wriggle room and open up some negotiating space for both sides. Others that we spoke to, the former Finance Secretary Subhash Garg, the former Deputy Envoy to the WTO Anjali Prasad and Jayant Das Gupta, believe that India must stand still at this point in time, and India must engage with countries like Brazil and China and so on and so forth, bring other trading partners to the table to devise and design a response to President Trump's threats, because one doesn't know what he wants today and he may shift the goalpost tomorrow. So they believe that this is not an opportunity to build a bridge, because that moment, that opportunity has passed. Indian exporters had already sent out an SOS to the government. This was when the tariff was 25%. Meetings have been held over the last few days. They've been asking for interest subvention. They've been asking for government's assistance. Now with 50%, as you heard exporters telling us on the channel, the Federation of Indian Exporters, saying that already orders were on pause. Now, do they find themselves completely locked out of the US market because they don't believe they have the absorptive capacity to absorb 50% tariffs, 25% perhaps they could have maneuvered some way around it, but at 50% they believe they're priced out of the US market. Can you afford to close the doors on the US market, have the doors of the US market closed on you? That is the big question at this point in time. And more importantly, the larger issue, India and the US are strategic allies. The US calls India a strategic partner. Where does this leave the strategic partnership? Where does this leave its natural ally? That's the big question. And, are we likely to see irreparable damage being done to the India-US relationship in light of what has happened, not just over the last few days, but more importantly today? When you call someone a strategic partner and then impose the highest tariff rate of 50%, a penalty on India, where does that leave the question of a strategic partnership and a question of the two countries being natural allies? I think this is going to be the larger ramification of the developments of the last few days as well. So this is bad news for exporters. We don't quite know what the response of the Indian government is likely to be. We haven't so far heard from the government, but I would imagine that a statement will follow. And more importantly, what is it that President Trump wants? Will he be satisfied if India were to say, okay, no more Russian crude? Will that end this tariff battle? The answer to that question is we don't know. We can't be sure. And what qualifies as the US's interests, aligning with the US interests? That's the big question. From a market standpoint, we've already seen the GIFT Nifty reflect the kind of sentiment that we expect in the markets, but all the export stocks that have been under pressure, the likes of Gokuldas, etc., those are going to have to be stocks to watch, because this is not just unpredictable. This is now different terrain. This is a different ball game. We don't know when and how this is actually going to end. So this is going to be a tough one. This is going to be something the markets will also have to digest. We've already seen the impact on the currency. The currency has been at a new low, almost at 88. So this is going to weigh on the currency markets as well, along with the stock markets. But the larger question of the Indian response, and I think what has been amply clear from all the experts that we've spoken to at this point in time, is don't fall for provocation. Do not provoke, because then there will be further adverse action. And that is not what we want or we need at this point in time. So don't provoke, but also consider very carefully if and when you choose to put something on the table by way of concessions, but don't provoke. That's the unanimous view that's coming from all experts, because President Trump has made it very clear in the order that if there is retaliation, the order can be modified, which means the order will be modified even more adversely. So these are things that we need to keep in mind. This is going to be a delicate balance. This is going to be a tough negotiation, if at all there is a negotiation, but it is a tough day for the Indian exporting community. It's a tough day for India-US relations, and it is a tough day for the macro economy. For more news and updates, all you need to do is follow CNBC TV18 on all of our digital platforms.